Hi everyone, this is Harold Szymanski of MBA Mission. I'm here to talk to you today about whether or not to apply round one versus round two. A lot of nuances there, which I am going to enjoy explaining to you. And obviously, there's no one, as I will get to, there's no one right answer for anybody. So that's what we're going to go through is really some steps about how to think about this decision, which in fact could be very impactful. At the end, we're going to have some time to do a little bit of Q&A just to make sure that I have answered any questions you might have. For those that are specific, those questions that are specific to you in particular, then I invite you to sign up with MBA Mission by going to our website for a 30-minute consult. And again, not a sales call, just to help you better understand the MBA admissions process. Talk a little bit about your own profile, about some of the nuances of applying to business school now or this year in particular, as well as any other questions you might have about the business school process, as well as your own application. So with that in mind, let me just give a pause here and let me share some slides with you. Okay, hang on for 1 second. If I do this right, we will all be impressed. Okay. Okay. Okay, let me just quickly see how I can actually get this to fill the screen. There we go. Okay, hopefully you can see that. Let me start at the beginning. That'll be a good idea. And at this point, let's get into the whole issue of round one versus round two. We like to call it the great debate. Whether or not it is best to apply round one. Deadlines are generally around September. Sometimes they bleed into October a little bit. Or round two, generally deadlines are early January, probably to mid to late January, even for some early February. So with that in mind, let's begin here. And what we always tell people, what the big picture is that you always think about quality before speed. That you submit the application when you feel it is at its best, whatever round that might be. Right now, we live in a world where it is actually very hard to get into business school. It has become harder and harder each year. So you want to produce the very best possible application you can. You need to have a near perfect application to get in now. So from that perspective, we just want to make sure you actually can do that. So in order to do that most effectively, let me just switch here. Let's go through what some reasons might be to apply round one versus round two. Let's start off with the reasons to apply round one. Okay, so for round one, clearly you will be first in line, meaning that once you get your application in, it is likely that we know definitionally that no spots have been filled, no scholarships have yet been taken. So this is particularly important for overrepresented groups or folks who need more time to tell their story because they are in some ways an exception to standards. So let's say you have a great story, or you're older, or you've done some other things. Business schools at this point in the process are going to take you are going to give you a little bit more time to understand your story. So a perfect example is you've done some wonderful things, but you have a low GMAT score. At that point, then you want to make sure that you explain that. And business schools in round one are going to be able to really spend their time listening to this. And that speaks more broadly to this idea too, is even if they hear other stories later, they haven't heard your story yet. And again, they're going to give it a little bit more time, so that if they're going to accept one person who used to be a artist, you better be the first artist that they see. So that's a reason to apply round one. There's also some reasons to apply round one, and that really gets at this. Some schools are very explicit about this, and there are certain advantages to applying round one. For a number of schools, for example, if you apply round one, you automatically get an interview. If you apply round one, then you have the opportunity to obviously find out sooner from other schools. If you apply round one, then there's going to be special events for you that round two applicants will not get. So from that perspective, schools may in fact be explicit about your applying round one. And we don't know this for sure, and it's very school dependent, but clearly at some schools the acceptance rate may be higher for round one versus another round. This is not always the case. One great way of getting this question answered is through asking the school directly. So if you have specifically been at a webinar, if you have specifically been at if you have specifically had the opportunity to do some Q&A with that school, then at this point you should have a good sense of what schools do give you an advantage for applying round one and what schools are somewhat ambiguous about that, or simply there is no advantage to round one versus round two. So with that in mind, let me stop for a minute and let me make sure that actually that there's no obvious questions here before I continue on to some of my other slides. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. I'd be looking in the chat right now for any comments. I do not see them yet. So with that in mind, let's get back to the presentation. Okay, so let me share my screen again. Oh, okay, great. So now we've gone through some reasons to apply round one, and honestly, all things being equal, you want to try to apply round one. I think that's really the bottom line here. And part of the reasons, again, get into things like round one can become round two, and round two can't become round one. And we'll get to what that means when we think about round one, when we think about round two, rather, and why there may be some reasons to push off your application to round two, even if it's almost done. And clearly there's going to be some reasons for that, which we will discuss. There's certainly something about applying round one and getting to know the results sooner, because if you apply round one and you end up not getting into the schools that you had hoped, then there's a round two strategy where you can apply to more schools. The flip side is, of course, if you get into round one, then the whole application process is over for you. And that come by the end of the year, you know exactly where you're going to be. And that in itself is very, very valuable and just shortens up your entire application process. There's also a reason to apply round one versus round two, and particularly if it fits into the schedule of your life better. Perfect example, for many people, work is a lot slower during the summer, so that gives you a little bit more time to work on your applications at work. So that in itself is going to be valuable. And similarly, as far as fitting into your life, if winter holidays, if the December or January include vacations, holidays, family time, then that's not, and you don't want to be worrying about your applications at the same time. So I think that's it. From that perspective, just from a life perspective, round one may make a lot more sense for you. With regard to reasons to apply in round two, and yes, there are some reasons. And a lot of it has to do with just what more can you tell business schools in round one that you can't tell them in round two. And a lot has to do with, well, maybe your test scores aren't where you want them to be. If that's the case, if you've been studying very hard and still you find come August, September, you're still under average in terms of your test scores, and you need a plan B when it comes to test scores, well, round two gives you that plan B, or gives you time for that plan B. In real terms, that might mean, God, you haven't been able to break open the GMAT. At that point, you start thinking about the GRE or the executive assessment, and if you apply round two, you'll then have time to prepare for both of those. Another reason to apply for round two is you are still working on your recommenders, or what that will frequently mean is that you have thought you had a recommender in hand. A recommender was all set to help you for round one, and for whatever reason, they end up not doing that. And at that point, you somewhat have to course correct, and you will have the time between applying round one and the time between applying round two to actually find the right recommender, particularly if someone has flaked on you. Additionally, one reason that people sort of go wrong in their applications, or one deficit for a lot of application, is that they simply don't know a lot about the school. That they are applying to business school, but they're not applying to a particular business school. So if you're thinking about applying to Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, understand these are very different schools, and you have to communicate in your application that you know that difference. So how do you figure out what that difference is now? Before you apply, you have to be pretty cognizant of what these differences are. Maybe you need the time between the round 1 deadline and the round 2 deadline to actually figure that out. That would include things like going to webinars, talking to students. In the past, it would have even included visiting the school, obviously harder for some than for others. Now you'll have to visit it virtually until things change. But again, something that is really important to do and is also overlooked very, very regularly is this idea here of, okay, understand that you're applying to a particular business school, not just business school generally. And to do that, you need to gather the right information. And there are certainly other reasons to apply round 2, and a lot of it has to do with you need time to tell business schools a little bit more about yourself. You need the time to either develop some skills or to be at a job, or just really have something additional to add in the 3 months between round 1 and round 2. Perfect example for that, if you've just switched jobs, it is very difficult to explain why you've switched jobs or what you're learning at a new job if you've only been there for a few weeks. By applying round 2, at that point, at least you'll have 3 months worth of work that you can share with business schools in a credible way. Another reason to apply round 2 is some great things are happening or about to happen that you won't be able to include in round 1. So if you're expecting a promotion in September and you can't talk about it in round 1 applications, that is a reason to talk about it in round 2 applications. So from that perspective, it certainly is worth it if you have some great things to say to business schools to hold on, wait until those things are actually happening, and then apply. And that also includes not just what's happening at work, but also outside of work. For example, if you're about to run a charity event, organize people, raise some money, that's probably something business schools want to know about. I joke here, if you're climbing a mountain, I don't know what that mountain looks like. Maybe it's not a mountain, maybe it's a trek, maybe it is just some sort of experience that you want to share with business schools. That, again, is a great reason to hold on to your application and apply round 2. And frequently we'll hear the question about, okay, what about applying round 3? Traditionally, in the world we used to live in, round 3, it was really difficult to get in round 3, particularly from overrepresented demographics. So if you're an international student, round 3, first of all, for many, many schools, scholarships are not available for round 3 applicants. For many, many schools, they want international applicants applying by round 2, just to make sure there's not going to be any visa situations. However, things have changed. Just given the world we live in now, COVID, how business schools are now approaching their classes and filling their classes, round 3 may be a possibility. It requires a lot of due diligence on your part to see if round 3 is appropriate for a school that you're looking at. In the past, I would almost always say no. There are certainly some schools that the round 3 acceptance rate is dramatically lower than either for round 1 or round 2. But at the end of the day, there may be reasons now, unlike in the past, where round 3 may in fact be the time that you want to, that it is reasonable to apply. I don't think it would ever be anyone's first choice to apply in round 3, but certainly it may now be at least reasonable. With that in mind, let me just move forward here a little bit. We're now going to enter the Q&A portion of the presentation, and hopefully you have a lot of questions here. If you'd indulge me for 1 second, let me tell you a little bit about MBA Mission, what we do. Maybe the most relevant, and you can see this slide here, maybe the most relevant for you is that we offer this 30-minute consultation. And you can go on our website, and it's very clear, and you can sign up with me or about 20 of my colleagues who are all terrific and spend 30 minutes on the phone. And we don't review essays at that point. We really just talk to you about your own applications, your strengths, your weaknesses, maybe the story you want to tell, and basically answer your questions. I'm very proud of working at MBA Mission. We are the #1 ranked admissions company, business school admissions company. We are full-time consultants. All of us, this is our full-time job. Yes, we get people into the very top schools, Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, etc. But we also help people find the school that is right for them, because fit is so important in this process. And as I mentioned earlier, how can you benefit from what we offer now and what we offer now for free? 30 minutes is a great place to start. MBA Mission, Frequently with GMAT Club, also puts on a number of different events that are probably worth looking at, not just this event, or you can also look back in time to some of the videos we've already done. You can look at the calendar to see what else is happening in the future. On our website, though, we have a tremendous amount of resources, free resources, whether that is our start to finish admissions guide that really has a lot of insight into the admissions process, or it is guides onto each school, or it is guides onto different careers you may have, interview primers, really a bunch of stuff there, certainly worth checking out. And obviously there are services that we offer that is on our website that we can certainly tell you a lot more about. Our most comprehensive package is called the Start Finish package. We hold your hand. We help you run this process. We help you do everything you need to do to apply. We also offer hourly services for those people who want just very specific support in one way or another. If you end up getting an interview, we offer mock interview sessions. We have some of them fine-tuned specifically for Harvard. We have a great session that has been very effective, which is a simulated Wharton team-based discussion, because as many of you know, Wharton has a very unique interview process, and we actually help replicate that so you're very well prepared when you actually have your Wharton interview. And then we have what we call our pre-application strategy, meaning if you are 1 to 2 years before you even apply, then it may be worth getting us involved in your process and help you think through maybe some professional steps you want to take, or other things, whether it's about testing or jobs to take, then we can certainly be helpful there as well. And as I alluded to, we have a team of about 25 people, a little bit less, from every top school. I went to MIT, Harvard, Yale, Columbia, our founders from UVA. We have great knowledge of each of these schools, not just because of the schools we went to, but also just by working with so many people over a long period of time. And we have direct connections to the admissions committee, and we really understand sort of what is going behind the scenes for a lot of different schools. With that in mind, I think it is now for a little bit of Q&A. Let me stop sharing my screen, and let me see what other what questions may be out there right now. And at this point, please put your questions into the private chat here. And let me start going through them. Is there any chance to get in admissions if you apply round 3 as a resident of that country? The short answer is I'm assuming that if you are a resident of the United States, then certainly you have a chance of getting in. If you're a resident of India, certainly there's a chance of getting into the Indian business schools. But the chance of getting in for a native is certainly a lot higher than it is for someone coming from abroad. So yes. And if you have any questions, by all means, give us a call or go for it for round 3, if only to set yourself up for round 1 next year. Okay, how competitive if I apply in round 1 versus round 2? Traditionally speaking, you have better chance of acceptance in round 1. That has always been under our understanding. It is very school dependent though, and schools are pretty clear about that. In terms of some schools, a school like Stanford, for example, and we never know these things for sure, but a school like Stanford, for example, I tell people, Stanford accepts whoever they want to accept whenever they want to accept them. So you're going to see a round 1 versus round 2 acceptance rate about the same. There are other schools that are very explicit, like MIT. The acceptance rate at MIT drops for each round by half. So if the acceptance rate at MIT now is 15–16% for round 1, maybe even a little higher, it's probably close to 8–9% for round 2. And MIT now for round 3. As with most schools, it is very, very difficult to get into, whether it's MIT or any school, round 3. Okay, hi Harold, can you tell me about differentiating my profile from other consultants in terms of leadership? I would think that a lot of consultants have very similar stories of impact, et cetera, with clients. What I would say is you have to really broaden what you mean by leadership. Okay, leadership people anticipate just being the president of a club, let's say. I see leadership more in terms of being a community builder. So that means anything from you mentor someone else, that is a type of leadership. You mentor someone else either formally or informally. If it's informally at the office, then a recommender can probably speak to that. Also, remember, if you're going to be spending 60 hours a week in the office, there's very little expectation by business schools that you're going to be doing something outside of the office, that you're going to be heading up that organization, that nonprofit organization. There is some expectation, though, that you take a leadership role in the office itself. Again, whether that means mentoring people or whether that means you're just the guy who organizes the Friday lunches where you bring a speaker in. Any one of those things can show leadership, and again, think of leadership in terms of community involvement. How would you compare round one and round two from waitlist management perspectives? Will you be able to manage the waitlist more efficiently in round one over round two? Great question. The answer is yes. The answer is yes. In round one, if you're waitlisted in round one, basically you get thrown in the pot with round two. At that point, then they take another look at you, and they'll compare you to the other round two candidates, and obviously you're going to have a better chance. Once you get to round two and you're waitlisted, it's going to be a question of what their yield is, how many people are actually coming versus not coming. So the reality is you're absolutely right. Secondly, can you share how to address an 11th-month resume gap? I didn't offer immediately after undergrad, but it was pushed out by 1 year due to the business, so I waited, did some travel, and light volunteer work. What I would say is be very open and candid. We live in a world now where it is not unusual for people's offers to be pushed for a year. As you write in the optional essay why this happened, and you have to write it in the optional essay about why this happened, I would love to see it a little bit more about your volunteer work rather than your travel. But at the end of the day, it's most important to be candid and open, and business schools understand. I think that's really the bottom line. Okay, Sandeep, there are a few B schools which has more than three rounds like Cambridge. Then in those B schools, which round is best to apply? Any school that has multiple rounds is generally what's considered rolling admission. So at that point, then just get in your application is the best application you can whenever you can. At that point, generally speaking, the acceptance rate across all the different rounds is going to be the same. I would just make sure that you have the best application you can. In many ways, that's more important than anything else. How do you rate German MBAs, and how does it hold good for North America region business? What I would say, and it doesn't matter whether it's German or somewhere else, is take a look at the employment report. See where people end up geographically and see what industries they end up in. If they end up in industries and geographically where you want to be, then that's the answer. And if you look and they don't end up anywhere near you want to be and doing the things you want to do, then I think that speaks to your question. But when should I give my GMAT to apply for round one? The reality is that as soon as you can, meaning it get out of the way as soon as possible. And also I say that because we have to take it multiple times. So in real terms, what does that mean? We like to start the application process itself, probably about the May timeframe. Can go a little bit longer, but very dependent on what school you apply to. Columbia is rolling admission, so you want to start that even earlier. You want to submit by July. So I would love, as a consultant, I love to have people have the GMAT wrapped up, or whatever test you take, by beginning of May. Is it worth going to Insead if you were from the US and want a career in consulting? The answer is probably yes. Insead is a consulting machine, so it certainly gives you the opportunity to land at the top consulting firms. And if you are, in fact, a U.S. citizen, you go and maybe spend a couple years at a consulting firm in some other part of the world, but it is easy enough to work your way back to the United States, if that's what you're interested in doing. Is 32 too old for an MBA program? No. The reality is that right now the average age of business schools for males is probably closer to 29. Women skew a little bit younger at 28. So what I would say to you is while you're above average, it is not dramatically so. 32 is not 37. So I think if an MBA program is what you want to do, now's the time to do it. Great then. Listen, as far as something I touched on that I want to make really, really clear again is this idea. One reason to push to round two is that you simply don't know the school very well. If you end up in round one, and if you look at your business school applications and you start realizing, you know what, I could substitute my Columbia application for my Wharton application, and then that's a problem. Also, people take their time, speak to people, understand what. Perfect. Then we're at 30 minutes, and then a few guys. Everyone sign up for 3:30 minute consult. Again, not very good then. Any last questions before we end things here? What could be a rough timeline for an applicant planning to apply in round one in 2021? By what time should you take the GMAT, shortlist schools, start writing essays, shortlist recommenders, etc.? Great question here. The reality is we like doing we really like starting the application in earnest, but by about May 1st. Love to have your GRE or GMAT scores finished up before then. Obviously, if they bleed into the summer, so be it. I mean, part of it is reflective of your own timeline. When it comes to recommenders, I hate it, as most people do, if you ask your recommender 2 weeks before the due date, would you write me a recommendation? I think even now, even 8 months before you apply, it's worth starting to get to know your recommenders, talking to them about business school, seeing if they think it'd be a good idea for you. So really, you want to have your recommender feel like they're your mentor. That really makes the best recommenders. So that's why I would start that process now. And it is not accomplished by asking them at the last minute or 2 weeks before to write your recommendation. As far as shortlist schools go, when I think about shortlisting schools, what it really comes down to is you're doing the research to know how schools are different. And doing the research means talking to people on the phone, doing webinars, and that sort of thing. So I'm not going to say you should start shortlist schools now, but you should certainly now start talking to schools, start learning about schools right now. So then you'll have a sense of how they're different, questions you could ask the admissions committee directly. So when it comes to school research, you can really start doing that now. As far as starting to write your essays in particular, you have some time to do that. Sometimes essay questions won't actually come out till about the May-June timeframe. That said, there are very few schools that change their essays completely. Maybe some of them will reward them some of them will change them here or there. It is very rare. There are instances, but it's very rare for schools to change their questions completely. So you can even start. I don't think there's really much to do now in terms of essay writing, other than getting to know what the essays might be. Terrific then. Okay. Having 13 years of experience, I'm planning to do an executive MBA from ESM&T, Berlin, or Manchester Global MBA, since I can't take complete time off from my consulting work. Please advise if these two schools are good enough to target, as their subject areas are pretty interesting. And honestly, that's up to you. Do you feel like the education that you get there is going to develop your skills in one way or another? Maybe, and when you say interesting, it might just be you need a year off or so, though executive MBA is not a year off, but you need to develop a different skill set, you need some different thinking, global perspective, you need to engage with different functions, then by all means, it may be worth it. But again, think about where you want to be in 5 years' time. Think about the skills you need to develop, and then think about, is an executive MBA program the right place for you to develop those skills? Okay, perfect then. Any last questions at this point? If not, I'm again going to encourage you to come and speak to us. Um, and what I would say is, when it comes to round one versus round two, it's the old, you can never prepare too early. You can certainly start preparing too late. So to the degree that you can, I always encourage people to apply round one, for the simple reason that acceptance rates are likely, though not necessarily for all schools, are likely higher for round one. There aren't quite as many people who, quote, look like you that have already applied for round one. There's certainly, every spot is open for round one. That's not the case for round two. And the reality is by planning on applying round one, you can do course correct as necessary. If you find you haven't broken open that test scores, then you know what, maybe you need another month to do that. I think that's really the bottom line. Round one offers you a tremendous amount of flexibility. Given that it's only January, there's no reason that right now people cannot apply round one. So that's what I would encourage you to do. And again, round one can become round two, but that's not true the other way around. And again, I'm just getting prompted here to go to our website, mbaadmissions.com. You can sign up for a consult, 30 minutes, but it's right on our website. Okay, and what I would also say is keep on looking for at GMAT Club. They're always doing great events like this, and they're always going to be a great resource for you. Okay, great then. Good. Last call for questions. Otherwise, I'm just going to wish everyone a good day and good luck with this process, which is, yes, somewhat difficult, but also very exciting. Okay, then. This is Harold Szymanski from MBA Admissions, and look forward to maybe hearing from some of you. Bye now.